Hello and welcome to our professional development that we are offering on fostering an inclusive classroom environment in the age of COVID-19. My name is Cainan Townsend. I am the Director of Education and Outreach at the Robert Russell Milton Museum, Civil Rights Museum located in Arlington, Virginia. I'm joined today by two classroom educators, Ms. Antoinette Waters up in Arlington, Virginia, and Mr. Devon Johnson in Virginia Beach. We had another panelist as well per the advertisements, Megan Ferenczi, the museum educator at the Director of Education at the Holocaust Museum, but last minute. Now, just to kind of clarify the purpose kind of this professional development and why we felt the need to really do this, inclusion, right? This whole concept that has really sprung into prominence and dominated a lot of conversations in recent kind of years and recent times, justifiably so. Certainly, it's already a difficult thing to achieve in an in-person space, right? And so we wanted to take some time to have a conversation here, and then towards the end and after the professional development, certainly offer some resources on how to pursue being an inclusive space, even if it's virtual or hybrid, and whatever this kind of looks like, right? And the idea of being comfortable with kind of this idea of inclusion growing and changing as humans and social identities kind of grow and change as well. Teachers just have a very difficult task before kind of the pandemic, but we wanted to just kind of sit and have a conversation about kind of how the transition has gone and kind of what some things that folks are doing to try to make sure that we are being inclusive of all of our students and making sure the classroom environment is safe and students feel welcome and valued. So now, if our panelists will introduce yourselves, just kind of say hello and who you are and maybe how long you've been in education. Antoinette, if you wanted to start, and Devon, if you want to follow.
Okay, so my name is Antoinette Waters. I am an 18-year veteran who teaches at Wakefield High School in Arlington, Virginia. I teach African American history, as well as advanced placement U.S. history and economics and personal finance.
Great.
All right, and I am Davon Johnson, a teacher here in Virginia Beach. I teach at Glenwood Elementary, formerly at Lynn Haven Elementary. I have been teaching, this is year 5 for me, and I've taught 3rd grade, 4th grade, and 5th grade. And in 5th grade, jumping from just language arts all the way to being self-contained, teaching all 4 subjects in science, social studies, math, and language arts.
Great. So both of them have a very kind of rich history in teaching and education, and both phenomenal educators and have tremendous insight. So let's start by kind of going backwards, but pre-pandemic. I know to everybody 2020 has really seemed like 2 months and 20 years in the same kind of setting. So I'm curious as to what did this kind of topic look like for you both before kind of the pandemic? What kind of things did you all do kind of as the head of your classrooms to make students feel welcome and valued, regardless of kind of what they look like and where they came from and such? I'm just curious as to what the pre kind of looked like before COVID.
Devon, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
Oh, you can go ahead and start.
Okay. I think that a part of creating a welcoming environment in your classroom honestly starts with something really simple. And it's something that I have used time and time again. It's the whole, making kids talk to each other. So they'll get these cards where they have to say hello, but their partner it's all done in different languages. So it'll be hello in tons of different languages, and they have to just find their partner who says hello in their language, who actually can speak their language. And then we go into questions about just simple things, really simple. Hi, what's your name? What personal pronoun do you prefer? That it's something really super simple. When's your birthday? really just kind of those surface questions that kind of gets everyone, I would say, comfortable. And then what's the what's the best place you've traveled to? And then another one I like to ask is, what's your favorite food? So those are some questions that are really, I would think, very surface. My kids really enjoy the "What's your favorite food?" question, because high schoolers love to eat, and you end up with this. And then introduce everyone to the whole class, and you end up with this other great conversation about food and how much money we spend on food and why this is your favorite food. And so, I always say food can also be that bridge. It can bridge a gap. So that's something that I do in my classroom to really foster that beginning of it, inclusivity, because a lot of people can identify with food. We all have to eat. So I start the year with that, and then as we go along, especially when it's what personal pronoun do you prefer, at the very beginning of the year, people feel comfortable. Okay, this person is asking me what is the personal pronoun that I prefer. And so it really does foster that respectful community. And we don't, no, there is no judgment. I always say that there is no judgment. The kids sometimes make judgments when it comes to kids and what they like to eat, those funny things. But outside of that, it really does foster that great inclusive environment.
And we do a similar thing in the elementary setting and through a lot of our morning meetings. So we have morning meetings literally every day, every morning, and we have a closing meeting at the end of the day, just to wrap up how we did through the day. And that's when we talk a lot about our social, emotional. We talk a lot about how we work with other people, about those 5 C's and all of those good things like that. And so we kind of do the same thing as Ms. Waters does in high school. And so I do a big introduction, but with elementary students, a lot of them don't make the connection when you're just learning about other people, right? And when you're hearing this person likes macaroni and cheese. So they don't really connect that, hey, I'm getting to learn from someone else. I'm learning about someone else's culture, right? And so I model a lot of that through me. They can connect with their teacher more quicker than they connect with their peers when they have conversations like that. So I model after myself. So I talk about how I like sports and what sports I like, and who doesn't like it, who does. We find out things like that. I talk to them about my pet peeves. What are some pet peeves? And so they come up with their own pet peeves, because there's a lot of things that, especially elementary students, they don't really understand what a pet peeve is and why they get so annoyed with certain things and all of those different nuances. And so I try to model through myself and then include them. And so they're open and receptive to other students in the classroom, the differences. And I like to, sometimes I talk about some of the things that they don't even know about, right? Because they were born within the last 10 years, right? So I talk about things like that, and they're looking at me like I'm crazy because they have no idea what that is. And there are easier ways to do these things than before. So they get to see, like we were talking about that judgment, they judge me first. And so we talk about that. And so when they listen to each other, they're able to see and hear the differences between themselves and make a more respectful judgment, I should say.
Yeah, y'all both touched on some important themes I definitely wanted to talk to them a little bit more about. So within both of kind of what you all were saying, the importance of kind of starting how you want to finish. As a museum educator, I don't, and I think Megan would share if she was here, we get to see a higher volume of kids before a significantly less amount of time, right? So first impressions are key. And for me, as I work in a civil rights museum, we talk about some things that can be some hard history to hear, right? And we pride ourselves in speaking of history in a very objective way, which means there's a lot of trauma. And so for me, I find it very useful because they know each other, but they don't know me. So I can, to me, it's just kind of like, making a good first impression on my part, but also like to start off talking with some group expectations, group norms. There's some neat activities I do in which I kind of put the onus on them because they know how to act, right? But, talk to them about what kind of things when they're younger groups, it's about like, do Do you run in school? No. Okay, so you probably shouldn't run here. Do you speak over each other in school? No. So it's kind of letting them create that space, and then for them creating it, then they can hold themselves kind of accountable in that way. For high schoolers and certainly over middle school, that looks a little different. But for me, it's about like creating a space where folks feel like they can be comfortable and have freedom to fail. That makes sense. So for the older students, if I'm talking kind of diverse, inclusive topics, we create ground rules, but they're a little bit different. It's speak for I, not for we, right? Speak from your perspective, not for the whole perspective of a group of people. It's being empathetic, it's listening, it's stuff that we certainly learned throughout the years, but great way to kind of start already in that space. I think that's very, very important.
I agree. I was going to say, I agree with you there, especially in the elementary setting, because a lot of that stuff has to be taught to them. And a lot of the teachers just expect them to know it, or because we teach our own children that, we expect all children to know those things. But those are really things that have to be taught, especially that empathy. What does it mean to empathize with someone? And so I definitely agree with you there, Mr. Townsend.
So, and that brings me another question, but I think I might say that. But yeah, I don't think kids get enough credit. Kids of all ages, really. I think certainly, and especially for the younger groups, Mr. Johnson, I'm sure you'll concur that, teaching about the constructs of what segregation was and all the kind of more kind of concrete topics may be too much for elementary school, but they understand right and wrong, right? They understand fairness. They understand when somebody's getting treated poorly, right? And they can articulate that, and in essence, that's what some of those more complex topics are, right? Not treating people fairly. They understand that. They understand when people don't share and when people are rude and nasty. And so I think kids should get some more credit, kind of as a bit of a tangent, but still kind of related. Okay, I'm doing too much talking. Let's go to the next kind of transition. What was it like for you both, whatever you're comfortable sharing? How was this transition, whether you started off as as a hybrid approach, or if you started off exclusively virtual? What has this whole kind of transition of sorts been like for you both, broadly?
Well, I can go and start. For me, it's been a roller coaster of emotions, because we went with the hybrid approach. And so here in Virginia Beach, they had parents and families and teachers had a choice whether they were going to be hybrid or they were going to be completely virtual. And so me personally, I was hybrid, meaning that we started the year with everyone being virtual. However, when the metrics went down with the pandemic, we were able to send certain kids back who preferred to be back in school, along with those teachers. So around October 6th is when I ended up back into the classroom with my students. However, we do have half of our schools still virtual at the moment. And so imagine having 2 first days of school, and that's how it really was for me. Starting the year off virtually, having those expectations, teaching those norms, which are totally different from being in class, to being in class on the 6th. They know me now. However, we're now learning, how do we socially distance in the classroom? What does it look like in the classroom? Of course, we cannot all go to the carpet and sit together and touch all the materials and all of that. So it's been, I would say, not even the first day of school. It was like a first week of school in the beginning, and when we went back face to face. So those are just 2 big time frames, I would say. So, trying to keep on pace, trying to make sure everything is covered. It's just been a pretty big whirlwind, roller coaster. Finding my groove, though. And I found my groove.
That's wonderful. High school's a little different from elementary. I think elementary school kids follow directions really well. And my young people are young adults, so we are all 100% virtual at the high school level where I am in Arlington, except for a small group of students with special needs due to the matrix that Virginia, the VDOE has set out. We haven't met some of the benchmarks that are on the matrix for just the COVID. So it has been a different year, but I think that as educators, we have to try to reach out and become as connected as possible. So high school is a little different. The kids will email you. You can keep up with them. We use Canvas. Every student has a MacBook. So we've really tried to bridge the gap. And now we have opened the school for limited students who are not special needs but need better Wi-Fi. So it's a very small amount because, again, our numbers in Northern Virginia are still pretty high compared to some areas. So for me, teaching on virtually, it's tough making connections, but you do your best by remembering a child's voice. So a lot of times it's kind of remembering their voice and being able to say, oh, is this such and such? Because I have my husband set up my office. So I have like multiple screens to make sure that my classroom runs very seamlessly, like it would if I were in the classroom, trying to make sure it stays seamless. But you just have to foster those moments. So you have to have breakout groups. The kids have to get to know each other within those breakout groups. So I try to keep the same group together so that they have learned each other, know each other, do group work together with being, distant. So those are some things that I've done to foster inclusivity. The kids, I also asked, like, hey, what personal pronoun do you prefer? So they had a form that they filled out at the beginning of the year to let me know what personal pronouns they prefer, what name do you want me to call you? Because in teams, you can't change their name. So I have to have it on my actual role. So when they raise their hand and things of that nature, I call them by the name that they prefer and the pronoun that they prefer. So we've been doing the best we could. It's high school, so it's a little different. And kids in high school were always afraid because they can get really close without following directions.
Yeah, and you started answering my next question. So Mr. Johnson, I'll give you a chance to answer too, but like and when I think you answered it very well, and exactly some things I think Devon and myself would say too, although I don't have a virtual classroom, but certainly presentations that I've given to school groups since then, it's been like, all right, how do I get them talking? Because like, I don't want to do all the talking. And certainly the breakout rooms and such have been helpful. And for me, it's been really trying to be as interactive as possible, which is super difficult through the virtual setting. But Devon, have you found that some of the stuff you were talking about earlier in terms of that introductory stuff, icebreaker type stuff, I mean, did you find creative ways to transition that to virtual, or was it just kind of not much able to transition?
No, I definitely was trying my best to make sure it transferred into the virtual setting, because I'm really big on making sure kids feel safe, making sure they feel like they're loved, and they are part of this class, they're part of this family. So I definitely tried my best to pull it into a virtual setting. So I did a lot of Padlets where I had like a discussion question, and we would answer those things. And that's how I found out about their pet peeves. I did a bunch of interest surveys through Padlets and that we kept together. And so I actually build my lessons around those Padlets. So we have one about pet peeves. So in my lessons, I'm going to include some of those topics, right? Or let's do, we're doing math word problems. I'm going to include some of those, things that you said in your pet peeves into this math problem. We did a lot of getting to know the names, nicknames, I don't know, just different things about the students that they wanted to share. And then, so I used those things into our lessons as well. We did a lot of dance breaks. So I'll just put music on my computer and, we just did some dance breaks and different things like that. I did a lot of display. I'll display a poster, and then I will have them in small groups, just talk about, what does this mean? How does this relate to me? So I did try my best to get as creative as possible. Oh, we did a lot of virtual would you rathers. Would you rather do this or do that? And, you know, on the screen, give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down. If you agree, put your computer in the air or something like that. Just silly things like that to get them engaged.
Yeah, that sounds pretty cool. I think you two are really great examples of ingenuity and flexibility and adaptability. But for maybe some, so let's say hypothetically, you know, a colleague were to approach you both and just we're looking for resources. You know, Mr. Johnson, Ms. Waters, you're so great with, you know, with your students virtually and such. You know, how can I improve, right? How can I be better about being welcoming, being inclusive for my students? Would it, you know, is there something I can read? Is there like a website? You know, in what ways can I sharpen my tool and improve my craft? What would you recommend to those teachers who are looking to be a little bit better with being inclusive?
I think Mr. Johnson hit it right on the head, especially when he talking about himself first. I love that because every morning, and I know you all probably think it's funny, but when I normally taught, when I was in the classroom pre-COVID, especially in AP US history, when you teach those upper levels, you're teaching those juniors and seniors. Sometimes buses were late. We all know about late buses. So instead of punitive, you know, kind of this whole punitive, oh, you're tardy, kids feeling really frustrated, I would have a morning rant. And my kids actually got used to these morning rants for years and years and years. And they ended up coming up with a web page. The crazy stuff Mrs. Waters says, it was my maiden name previously, it was what Mrs. Dempsey says, like, in my funny morning rants. So it would be just random things that maybe would happen to me on my drive-in. Or it would be a crazy thing that I saw on the news or some just weird thing that happened. And what it does is, like Mr. Johnson said, it brings you into that having a relationship with your students. They see that you are human. Like Mr. Johnson said, you know, he talks about his pet peeves. He talks about his, you know, the favorite sports that he loves. You know, for me, I'm a huge football fan. I'm a huge Eagles fan. So the kids know if the Eagles have played on Sunday and they sucked, I'm going to like have the worst day. You know, they know my morning rant is going to be all about the Philadelphia Eagles. And so I honestly think that as educators, we have to, especially in this online environment, this pandemic, we have to give ourselves grace. And so I don't think that there's a magic bullet or a magic website, because sometimes we can have too many resources. And so I really think everyone this year is a first year teacher, period. All of us, no matter how long you've been teaching, you are a first year teacher this year. You have to redevelop and rehone your skills. So I honestly go back to those, I would say, the principles that we learned in schools of education, which is relationship building. Start there. And you need to reflect within yourself, how do you best build relationships with people? And once you find that out within yourself, how do you best build relationships with people, you then have to model that for your class. Like Mr. Johnson was saying, you model that for your class, and you yourself have to say, what am I going to do to reach out? How am I going to do those things? So whether or not you communicate with your students weekly or bi-weekly saying, hey, you haven't turned in this, you haven't done that, are you okay? It's something as simple as, are you okay? Because I see that you haven't done this, or I see that you're not doing that, or I see you haven't, you know, chatted in the chat, you know, or in the feed. So I think that there isn't a magic bullet or there isn't a magic website. It really now has to come from within you, because it's about people now. It's about us valuing people and not things. That's what I think this pandemic has taught all of us, you know, to value people and not things. I don't know. Mr. Johnson?
No, I agree with that. I am one to think about in the classroom. If I was a student, if I was this 8, 9, 10-year-old in this classroom, how would I want to feel? How would I want to learn? How would I want to be respected? And so I use that as my mindset to create all of my lessons. How am I going to get my students to empathize with one another? How am I going to get them to, listen and do all these other things? And so, as you said, you got to dig within, right? But you can use some of those things that you've used before. So I know I've been doing morning meetings. So now I just have to be creative of how I'm going to, incorporate those things into this virtual setting or in my face-to-face setting with these socially distant, parameters. And so I still use my morning meetings. I still find those, and you can look online and find tons of different morning meeting ideas. So there's no one resource for a morning meeting, right? And doing those things, making sure that, hey, I'm providing choice for all of my students. Now, before, it might have been where they were, all together in the classroom setting at the carpet and we're modeling these things. And no, it doesn't work that way. So I had to be creative in how I'm going to provide choice. How am I going to give them the resources that they need? Most things are going to have to be digital now. And just going about it that way. So just taking what I know, taking what the students would want, and then trying to be creative in how I'm going to go about it. A lot of the task cards and this, that, and the other, the scoots, we can't do anymore, but I can be creative in how I'm going to provide that information to the kids. So we do a lot of digital sorts and then digital little scoot games. I might put them in groups of 4 in a breakout room. And so they're working together to answer that problem. It's just being creative in how we're going about all of it.
Yeah, I think you'll both give great examples and then great kind of, like part of this whole conversation just about, when I'm talking diversity, equity, inclusion, the first thing you gotta do is look in the mirror, right? Like, because if you don't understand yourself, you can't really begin to try to understand somebody else, right? And I think that's being introspective about kind of your teaching style and, in your kind of social interaction style, whether you're introverted or extroverted, whatnot, is probably very, very crucial. And I love that quote, Ms. Waters, about, we're all first year teachers, right? Because, this is different, whether you've been teaching for 40 years or whether you've been teaching for 4. I can't even go. This is your first year. What does that look like? You might have the most advantage because it's your first year in the classroom. But yeah, I like what both of you all were saying a lot, and you're answering a lot of the questions I had planned for, which is always these conversations going extremely well. I do want to ask, because I do think often, for me, like recruitment, like of classroom teachers in general is kind of that diversity piece, but retention is that inclusion piece. So I guess my question leans kind of more towards the diversity part, but how important is it to have diverse teachers in classrooms across the world, really? And then how can we get more? I mean, of course, this is a bigger problem than we can solve today, but how important is it to have diverse teachers? And what do you all think we could do to encourage more diverse teachers to go into the classroom?
It is very important, and this I can kind of get on my soapbox with this part, but I'm not going to go there. But it's very important, and I see it all the time being a male in the classroom because they don't see a lot of males. This year in this new school, I've had so many students oh my gosh, I have my first boy teacher. I'm my first boy teacher. Oh my gosh, you're my favorite. Well, why am I your favorite? I don't know. You're just a boy teacher, right? And so they've never seen that. They've never had that experience. And so I'm trying to live up to their expectations, but at the same time, it's just they needed that visual. And these are all types of students, not just male students. So you're talking about all types of students who are seeing a different perspective and seeing different, mannerisms and seeing a different culture coming from me. And so I think that's opening up a lot of, biases that they might have. It's opening up a lot of understanding and learning as well. So I think it's very, very important that we have more diversity within the education system. Now, how do we get there? That's a whole, big process. But part of that is, I think the world has to be aware of what our kids need. Okay. And so understanding, we talk a lot about the 5 C's, and why they're important, because all these 5 C's are going to help us in the future, make us future ready. So the world understood that. I think that would help in, having more people guide students to get to that future ready moment.
I'm with Mr. Johnson on this. I'm a career educator after 18 years, I guess. I'm stuck with it. But I think that multiple perspectives, like he said in the classroom, is necessary. And so I support everything he said. Spot on. I don't need to say anymore.
Yeah, and I think a quick answer, and and I think working with, so this past year I was working with the African American History Education Commission to rewrite the history standards in Virginia, and I think a real quick answer to that question I pose, a lot often people will just will say HBCUs, right? But that, which is a perfectly valid response, but at the same time, don't overburden HBCUs, which are already, I think I heard there's a statistics where HBCUs have 25% or something like that of Black African American students in the nation who are in college, but they grant 50% of diplomas. And I just had, it's just something absolutely staggering. And it just kind of goes to show that they're already doing a lot. But I think just like with the COVID stuff, recruiting more diverse educators requires creativity and ingenuity. You got to sweeten the pot. You have to, do things a little bit different. I think we get so caught up in equality that we often forget equity, which is probably really a better end goal, because everybody doesn't need the same thing. And if you want a specific demographic, and which is important to have representation, then you might have to go searching, right? It's not as easy as just opening something up and seeing whatever happens. So, all right, it's about 11:18. I know my fellow panelists have to go very soon. I wanted to give we only have one live attendee, but folks who are watching this kind of post live, you can comment in the chat on Facebook or wherever we end up posting this, YouTube, whatnot, and you can ask questions there. But I wanted to ask our attendee if they had any questions for us before we close out. And if you don't, that's okay. You can just type in the chat if you do, and if not a problem. All right, it does not seem like it. Ms. Waters or Mr. Johnson, I think that this has been a great conversation. Some things that I'm certainly taking away from this. I know this is going to be shorter than what I originally intended, but with one less panelist, I don't want to feel like we have to drag on. I think it's been a great conversation. A lot of what I'm taking away is the notion of starting strong, right? Setting the pace and setting the kind of environment that you want to finish in. Really focusing on trying to find those commonalities that both of you all were talking about. Things that make us, appreciating the diversity and our differences, but at the same time trying to find some common ground. The notion of leading by example, I think, is crucial, right? Making it easy, making yourself vulnerable, so that way the students can be vulnerable as well. Another thing that stood out to me, and this is particularly for you, Mr. Johnson, I think more, or actually, and Ms. Waters too, but how much we connect through touch, right? Like we have had to, due to COVID, we basically have to cut out an entire sense, one of our entire senses in terms of touch. High five, fist bump, whatever, hug, like we have to pretty much cut that entirely out. So being creative and figuring out a way to kind of continue to build that human connection is also crucial. Assuming goodwill, kind of something I got from Ms. Waters, certainly, of like with the students being late with the bus and such. And then in general, kind of humanize like our teachers, right? Like we are humans, we go to grocery stores, we have families, we eat, we sleep, right? Like we're humans, right? And I think y'all both bring a very important point about that. But yeah, and kind of in closing, is there anything else that you all wanted to mention?
Thank you, Cainan, for inviting me to the panel. This was really fun.
I was going to say the same thing. It was a pleasure to be here. I really do appreciate you inviting me.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, both of you all have incredible insight and are both amazing teachers. And I think the public needs to hear more from amazing teachers. And I think we need to pay teachers more. But that's my soapbox, Devon. You said your soapbox was the higher diverse teachers. I'm like, we can't expect them to, do everything. And now we're expecting them to be digital gurus too. Like it's gotta be some give and take. Right now it's just take. But yes, I appreciate you both, and I hope you both are doing well and continue to do well. And I will look forward to the next time we can converse in the future.
Absolutely. I did want to say one last thing. And the one thing that stood out to me and the connection you made was that teachers are human, but we have to remember that children are human too. And they're going to make mistakes and they're going to, fail. And it's okay to fail. And one of the biggest things I tell my students is we're all make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. It's only a few of us that learn from them. And so we're going to be those few that learn from those mistakes because we're all human. And so everyone deserves grace. Everyone deserves mercy. It's going to be okay. And so I just wanted to share that with you because it just stood out to me.
Yeah, I think that freedom to fail is absolutely crucial, especially when talking about let's say if I misgender, I used the wrong pronoun, right? How easy would it be for me to just be furious and vitriol and anger and when I could make that a teachable moment, right? Like I want to be vulnerable enough to which look, I make mistakes. I'm not perfect. I will apologize and we can move on. That's that aspect of grace. Absolutely. And here at Moten, it's one of the kind of ground rules sometimes we'll set is and Devon, you probably remember this, oops and ouch, right? If you say something that maybe you didn't intend to come off the way it was, give that person a chance to clarify. And if it's something that's off the wall, we can approach it then. We can confrontation is okay as long as you do it respectfully. However, sometimes you just misspeak or you say something in the context you didn't intend it to be. I think that can help everyone grow if we allow ourselves to fail and make mistakes, but make sure you learn from them. Ms. Waters, I think you had something too.
Yeah, grace. That's all my statement this year is grace. That's what I'm living by. And I think that's it. Everybody needs a little bit of grace. So that's it. Our children, like Mr. Johnson said, they deserve grace. They're going to make mistakes. No one is perfect. And we are living through very bizarre times. And bizarre times, sometimes, as they say, we have to have a little bit of creativity in our approach and give ourselves and each other some grace.
Absolutely. And I think if there's one word we come away from with this, I think that's a great word to come away from with grace. All righty. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Johnson and Ms. Waters, for tuning in. Y'all stay safe and healthy until the next time we can meet again.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Have a great day. Bye, everyone.
Have a good one.
Thank you.